Well, hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Scott Birkenbiel, and I'm an April board member and moderator for the meeting today. Thank you for joining us for the support for CIL leadership, EDs, CEOs, program managers, assistant directors. I want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started today. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar pops up. Depending on what device you are on, you can find that menu bar at the top or at the bottom of the screen. This is where you will find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view the captioning by selecting the CC tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, you can find the interpreter on the screen with the name Crystal, and I'm not sure who the other one is. Do you know, Crystal?
It's just one.
Just one today?
Crystal.
Okay, Thank you. If you are only able to see the speaker, make sure you are in gallery view so you can see the interpreter and the presentation at the same time. You can find the option to change the view at the top of your screen under the tab for view. If you have technical issues, please use the chat feature. You can find the word bubble in the same menu bar. Once that is selected, that will allow you to follow along with the chat or add your comments. If you would like to turn the chat feature off, if you are using screen reader, you can do that using Alt capital H. To ask a question or make a comment, you can select the hand option on the menu bar that allows us to know that you have a question. For those of you on the phone today or using keystrokes, we ask that you press *9 or Alt-Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute. You can select the unmute option or Alt-A if using keystrokes. Remember, if you join into the conversation, please keep all background noise down as much as possible to allow us to hear you clearly. As a reminder, April and our conference is a safe and inclusive space for marginalized communities. We ask that everyone present in the session today treat each other with respect, and that you enter this and every session with good intentions. This includes respecting names, pronouns, and other personal identifiers, and avoiding the use of harmful or derogatory language. And with that, I will turn it over to Diane.
Thanks so much, Scott. Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Fleeser. I am a CIL director in Michigan. I run the CIL called Disability Network, West Michigan. My visual description is I am a light-skinned woman in her late 30s. I utilize pronouns she and her, and I have long brown straight hair, brown eyes, and multicolored rimmed glasses. I am also type 1 diabetic, utilize an insulin pump, and also an Iraqi war veteran who served in 2005. I am so happy to be facilitating this conversation today with all of you, and am so glad that you've joined us. I'm going to start off by just sharing a few words and thoughts with all of the leaders on today's call. And then we really are hoping for this to be a fruitful, mutually beneficial conversation, a safe space where we can share and connect on our ideas and experiences and our challenges and opportunities as well. And as independent living leaders, a primary skill we all share is the ability to manage and support diverse teams of individuals with different backgrounds, experiences, and expertise. This is not news to anyone on the call, but COVID has greatly impacted all of us in how we lead our teams and run our organizations, as if being in a leadership role wasn't complex enough, right? So let's go on this journey together. The goal of this session today, again, is just to connect and share with our peers from across the country. Leadership, as most of you know, in today's world requires a multitude of skills and competencies. Um, and I think there are leaders right now that feel like they might be thriving. They've really embraced some of the changes and reprioritizations that COVID has forced. And then there are still a lot of us who are very much struggling and trying to sort through everything that's happened over the last couple of years. So whichever side of the coin you're on, there's a lot of emotion to sort through. Obviously, not only your own, but the teams that we lead and care for. It, for me, has certainly created an acceptance of nuance and uncertainty and a lot of creative and non-binary solutions. Um, it's been a journey, I'm sure, for a lot of leaders to try to find the calm in the chaos. And I feel like we are sitting in that chaos for a while. There aren't a lot of answers still to a lot of the questions our teams have, and we're all trying to, take the opportunity to re-examine. A term that I love and want to share with everyone. I don't know if there's any Brene Brown fans out there, but she calls this time the great awkward. And I think that, at least from my experience, represents this time frame so well. Everything feels really awkward. And then how do you fit your work life into that? And thinking about all of the loss that we've all dealt with. We've all dealt with a lot of grief, grief of how things used to be, grief from all the uncertainty, grief from loss of life. There's been a lot of loss and grief that we've all been dealing with. So yeah, I just want to open up the conversation by acknowledging, some of these emotions and this experience. I think it's going to be important to be vulnerable through some of these discussions and topics, possibly. Vulnerability is a universal human emotion, and we feel it when we expose ourselves to others and experience times of risk or uncertainty. So COVID definitely checks the box for both of those. And so to understand that vulnerability is not a weakness, and there's actually no empirical data to suggest that it's a weakness. In fact, the opposite is true. Acts of courage and decision-making are impossible if you don't first put yourself in a vulnerable position. And I'm sure many of us have had a lot of vulnerable positions that we've been in over the course of the last couple of years. Something I wanted to share and kind of start off our conversation and peer support with is, who is your support system? Who do we vent to? Who is that healthy outlet for you? In Michigan, I'm lucky enough to have 13 CIL directors. In our state, we have 14 CILs and 13 directors. And so for me, reaching out to my colleagues throughout the state was incredibly important, especially during the pandemic. We met weekly to support each other, to share practices and approaches, to consult with each other, problem solve. Peer support is literally what kept me going through the pandemic. So I just thought that was an appropriate example to use to start off this peer support session. And I would love to hear from others on this topic. What supports have been critical for you through this time? And what advice or maybe lessons learned are there that anyone would be willing to share with the group today? Looks like Kay, good to see you in the chat. Thanks so much for being here. And then there is a reminder that the session is being recorded, but it will not be shared. This is a safe space to express your thoughts and opinions without that fear of anyone playing it back. So want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. So let's open it up here. Does anyone have any examples or any situations that they can share that has been critical to your wellness, your emotion, your ability to do what you need to do in your leadership role?
Well, Diane, I'll kick it off here for you. This is Scott Perkinbuell, and I'm the CEO of Ability Montana, and we're one of the 4 centers for independent living in Montana. And actually, Diane, I'm kind of jealous to hear from you that you had all your center directors as a peer network system for yourself, because our center directors are help us a solution when we're in crisis, but we don't have enough regular peer support amongst us. We have some, and we do meet regularly, but it's not usually in a support situation. It's usually in a task-oriented fashion that we get together. But for myself, my supports have come from the rest of the leadership team here at our CIL. And we've actually, as a result of the pandemic, grew quite close together, and as well as we've been through a couple hard things through the with the business, and which has also bonded us together very well. And then of course my family is probably my number 1 support system, and so I can go home to them and vent everything that is on my mind, and it's a safe space that doesn't get back to anybody outside of my family. So I mean, that's where I've been able to find safe space for myself through this time.
Wonderful. Thanks, Scott, for sharing that. Yeah, family really, really, I don't want to use the word burden, of course, but I think a lot of us definitely turn to our family for added support throughout the pandemic, especially or for those vent sessions. What about anyone else? Is there anyone else who would like to share or give any examples of a support system for themselves in your leadership roles? What about the term that I used called the great awkward? Is that relatable to anyone right now in your leadership position? Do things feel awkward to you, or are you smooth sailing? Things are great. Yes, did someone
Yes,
unmute?
this is Kaylin. I was just gonna tell you, at least from my experience working as the youth services lead for my organization, I have struggled because a lot of the people that I work with are older than me being a 26-year-old female. Some people look at me as being a kind of management position, like, why do I have to listen to her? My child's her age. I've had stuff like that happen before. And so sometimes it is kind of awkward because I feel like I need to respect these people because they're older than me, but I also need to tell them what to do.
Kaylin, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that can be incredibly awkward. And how have you managed some of those situations? Do you have any tactics that you can share?
So what I've done is I've just when all of my coworkers or the people that work under me first started working, I told them, I was like, I know that I'm younger and I get that. I said, but please just, let me know if there's something going on. If there's a problem, please come to me and tell me. Don't try to fix it yourself, because some things could be a little bit more complicated than you realize, because a lot of them are newer to working in like the world of disability. And so I'm newer myself, but I can at least give them an option to have, an open communication with me, as to where I'm not going to go in and try to give them 50,000 rules, because that's probably going to make them angry.
Thank you, Kaylin. That is such a great approach and incredibly helpful. I do want to take just a step back and do a quick poll, just by a raise of hands. I'm curious to know, just so we can guide the conversation in a different kind of way to fit our audience, but how many executive directors or CEOs do we have on the call? That's going to be my first question. So if you can use the hand raising feature, I just want to take a quick view here. So I have Scott, Jasmine, thank you. Okay, so we have a couple of directors or CEOs. What about program managers? How many program managers? Sydney, thank you. Kaylin, Dearman, Chuck, wonderful. Thank you. And what about assistant directors on the call? Not seeing any. And then there might be folks on the call who are hoping to be in a leadership position in the future, and that's wonderful too. So hopefully you find some good takeaways from this discussion as well. All right, the great awkward. We can move away from that topic if no one else has anything to add. All right. And I do want to encourage you, if there are topics or things that you would like to share that I might not be teeing up, definitely put that in the chat or raise your hand. This is meant to be a session that's beneficial for us all, so your participation is critical in that. And while you're thinking on that, I do want to bring up this notion of the Great Resignation. I'm not sure if this is a term everyone is familiar with, but the Great Resignation is something we're hearing a lot about lately, and that is referring to the nation's quit rate. So the number of individuals quitting their jobs right now. I don't know if CILs have been immune to this at all. I know ours has not. We've had some turnover over the last couple of years for sure. And last November, actually, the nation's quit rate reached a 20-year high. The pandemic has really allotted people the opportunity to reflect on their work-life balance and reprioritize some of the things in their life. So I looked at some statistics about the Great Resignation, and last year during the Great Resignation, about 63% of folks were leaving because of low pay. 63% were leaving because of lack of opportunities for advancement. Over half felt disrespected at work, and that's why they left. And then about 48% said that childcare issues were a reason they quit. And then the other 45%, just lack of flexibility of putting in their hours. And so the Great Resignation is real, it's happening, and it's not over. One of the largest surveys of the global workforce predicted 1 in 5 workers will quit their jobs this year. And granted, we're at the end of the year, but they're predicting that this trend will continue. Oh, and someone asked, how does the Great Resignation coincide with quiet quitting? Have you heard that term? I would love to hear from others on this. Has anyone heard of the term quiet quitting, or have anything that they want to speak to regarding the Great Resignation?
So it's kind of funny that Rachel asked that, because I was going to ask a similar question. I was typing it as she sent it. I mean, what I could add to that is, a lot of people, so I could even say I've had 6 interviews in the last 3-4 weeks, right? One of them showed up. And we've all posted everything. It's been very clear what the job was or anything like that, but just nobody showed up. And we're growing our program, but the struggle is trying to find people that want to work with us and want to have a job, because all the people we've called, it's like they're either overqualified or underqualified, and then they just don't show up. Which I guess is kind of going along with the Great Resignation, but people just don't want to work anymore.
Kaylin, thanks so much for sharing that. I know hiring has been incredibly difficult for a lot of CILs in my state, for sure. And it is frustrating because of the growth, right? Like we're coming back from COVID. We are trying to establish new programs, new services, and adapt to the needs of our community. But that can be very difficult, as you're saying, when you don't have people showing up for interviews.
And that also creates a whole nother problem of employee burnout. Because we drive to go to different schools. And so we have 27 different schools and only 4 people driving to those schools. So it creates a horrible cycle that some people can't break.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of, I heard a conversation about just that, Kaylin, about people that are staying in their jobs are likely going to have a increased workload because of the difficulty so many of us are having in hiring. And so then how do you balance that increased workload that's being created from a shortage of workers and still retain the current staff you have? I know personally we've modified a lot of our job descriptions to include some of those gaps and where we can't hire right now. And we've been dedicated to making sure that those new job descriptions that do have additional tasks and things like that are, a higher compensation than what they normally would have been, recognizing that we're asking individuals to do more. I would love to hear from others on what hiring or retention or turnover is like for you right now. Is this a problem you're seeing? Or is this not an issue for everyone right now?
So this is a big problem for our center right now. Well, actually, the program manager has a lot of turnover right now, and I'm noticing when we're hiring people, they're not really quality candidates, unfortunately. So they interview really well when they got the job. They're not doing a great job of the job right now, which is a problem because we overall quality candidates for our consumers, or quality points for our consumers. One thing noticing that like we have like 2 employees who are amazing. They're kind of carrying the whole team sort of, which is not good. So it's a problem facing for sure.
Thanks so much, Sydney. I think that's a really important point to make. The candidates that you are interviewing, it might sound like you're feeling like you have to settle a little bit because of those quality candidates not being available for the positions you want. That's a really good point. Thank you so much.
We have constantly had an issue with recruitment in one of our offices, our Bozeman office. I work with Scott. Even though we're offering a pretty competitive wage, we're offering the hybrid work model. I mean, we're doing everything but delivering lunch here, and I still am not sure what they have to do. It's frustrating. We had a person for quite a while. She left us because of school and those things. We hired someone about, 10 months later, Scott, we finally got someone full-time. She, not a self-starter. I would say that her working in the independent living houses was more her style, where she had a set schedule. Everything was kind of, this is the way it needed to be. So we're really struggling with that. And in that office, we have been for a couple of years now. So we've had staff in and out, but it is extremely challenging. It's tough. And I'm kind of at a loss here as to where to go with it at this point. We tried Indeed. I spent, I believe it was $800 and got 4 people that applied, and not one of them had the minimum qualifications we were looking for. So again, a little frustrated. So thanks for listening. And my name is Sandy. I do need to change that. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. So I'm curious, we're recognizing, this issue. And Sandy, so it sounds like you've been willing to, try to offer, these carrots to dangle, like a modified work arrangement and things like that. Is there anything else that you guys have tried that has been successful or maybe caused even more frustration in your experience?
We used to work with job service. That really hasn't gotten us anywhere lately. It seems like the state job service here really isn't as effective as it used to be. We are going to, with this new open position that we have an independent living specialist open in Bozeman. We're going to try some different things and walk to the colleges, not just call them and talk to them and email the position description. We're going to go meet with them. Again, paying Indeed $800 for a month and not getting anything, very frustrating. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd appreciate it. Scott, am I missing anything?
Sure, it took me a second to figure out how to get it on mute. No, not really. And I wanted to go back though to the comment about the quiet resignation thing, and I popped up one of the articles that that was shared in the chat, and it's talking about people, that they've kind of quit. They still come to work, but they're not interested in going above and beyond. They're just there marking time, and I think I don't think we've had trouble with that yet. I mean, a couple of the folks that we hired and left fairly quickly, they didn't have the heart for the work that we do. I mean, all of our organizations are very mission driven, and to find folks that have the heart for what we do and want to support our mission and the desire to drive towards that is a challenge. And the folks that we have right now, several of them, we've had people that are been here 5 to 15 years with us, and they have the heart and the desire and the drive to deliver on our mission for our consumers. And finding those individuals to now has become more difficult than it had been in the past, I think, but I maybe not as difficult as it was. I think it's always been difficult to find people that want to drive towards our mission with us, and not just, you know, come to have a job. And, you know, in the community that Sandy's referring to, I mean, we're in competition. McDonald's has a banner in front of there. They'll pay up to $20 an hour. Taco Bell says they'll pay up to $23 an hour. So it's a little difficult on our fixed budget. So that's another thing. Our board at our most recent board meeting is we're going to start chasing philanthropic dollars in order to support and build capacity within the organization. And we've went on a whole new grant shotgun style grant writing. We're writing grants to whoever we can find that might fit what we're doing, in order to, you know, make our wages more competitive and offer the things that we need to offer to be competitive in the market that we're in. But then that drives the, you know, wages in all our other offices that the economy is not such that those McDonald's are offering $15 an hour. We're offering more than that. So we're super competitive in those markets, but in this one particular market, we're not competitive, and you know, we're struggle to be competitive in the wage part. And it appears to me these days people are walking across the street for 50 cents an hour, you know. So if you don't find the people in this quiet resignation where they just are at work, but they're not driving towards the mission with us, that's who we're looking for, is trying to find those people.
Yeah, so many important points there. And Eva, you've been so patient with your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Sure. My name is Eva Reynolds, and I'm the Associate Director with Disability Partners, which is a Center for Independent Living in Western North Carolina. We actually have 2 offices and we cover 14 counties. And it won't let me undo my video, but that's okay. You can hear me. That's the important part. So I think, you know, so yesterday, and I don't have any quick and easy solutions here, but I just want to say that, first of all, I live in a community where the unemployment rate right now is less than 3%. Asheville is a place that people come to live, and, you know, we have very rural counties. Yesterday, I went to a job fair. That's a big job fair that's put on by the Chamber of Commerce. And we used to call it the homecoming job fair. Come home and come back to these mountains and go to work. In 2018, I went to that job fair. There were 10,000 prospective job seekers that attended that job fair. Yesterday, there might have been in total 2,000 recruiters from every industry, including, there was a group that is representing a group in Canada that is looking for management or above executive level recruiters. Now they're in North Carolina. Used to be the other way around. Like, we used to go to Canada and get teachers. I remember that back in the day, right? So at one point I went around and I talked to a lot of different businesses. And what I think has always been hard for us, we've never, I mean, historically, I mean, I've been working for CIL for 12 years. Historically, we've never been able to compete with salary. We've been able to compete because of our flexibility, because of the things we offer. Most centers offer that break at Christmas where everybody gets paid. And we already had flexibility as far as scheduling, and if you had to bring a kid to work. And well, all of those things that were our edge, they're not our edge anymore, because most employers have had to create some kind of similar flexibility for their employees, because that's the only way you can keep and retain employees. And like a lot of you, probably my biggest pressure is there's a very small group of us left. And I struggle every day between the amount of pressure I'm putting on existing staff, which then sometimes translates to putting more pressure on myself, even though I try to be mindful of self-care. We all know that's easier said than done. So I'm struggling, like all of you are struggling with, since we lost our unique edge, like for instance, I'll give you an example. So Ally Bank, some of you know Ally Bank, it's an online only bank. I had a lovely chat with him yesterday. I'm also looking for people who will hire our consumers. Don't get me wrong, I'm always double duty at it. In Asheville right now, Ally Bank is starting customer service reps at $20 an hour. They don't have a 30 or 60 or 90 day wait period before their benefits start. They have full benefits package. And once they finish their training, they can opt to work from the office 3 days a week and work from home 2 days a week. It's really hard to compete with that. And I'm just stating what all of you have stated. I think there are some markets where it's even more difficult, and our market is, and the other part of our market is people have always come here and taken lower wages because they want to live here. So what I'm trying, and I've talked to a lot of my colleagues across the country in many industries. I have friends in lots of different industries that say people don't even show up for interviews. I don't know how we can figure out an edge, because even though I heard what Scott said about trying to find other funding resources to help pay for salary, we know that salaries are hard to do that way because you have to be able to maintain it. And if it's a temporary revenue stream, then it creates a whole nother set of problems. Or we have, we got some money for a position, and because of how that position is funded, I can start that person coming in the door at more money than I'm paying somebody who's been here for 5 or 6 or 7 years, which is a difficult pill to swallow because I don't believe that's fair. You know what I mean? And so I wish, man, I don't know what we're going to do. What I'm deeply grateful for is the people that have stuck with us. And they have stuck with us because, like Scott said, they have the passion, the commitment, they have the mission and the vision. But I worry about them. So if we can come up with something, I'm on, we're on, so thank you for letting me say what I had to say.
No, thank you for sharing. You touched on so many important points. One thing that you circled back to that Scott mentioned is, that core group that you both have talked about now that, is driven by the mission, connected to the organization. They're kind of your go-to people, but as you both also recognized, they're feeling it, right? Like we have to worry about burnout, and how do we then retain these amazing people who are showing up every day, committed to our mission? How do we retain them, and how do we protect them from those fears of burnout, which are also very real? So I would love to hear from anyone who has suggestions or best practices. Do any of you do anything or have come up with any ideas of how to show that appreciation, or solutions to retaining those staff, that group of staff, without that burnout factor? One example that is becoming very popular right now is the idea of a 4-day work week. I know that's something we've been talking about at our CIL. I will drop a link into the chat, but there's a really interesting pilot study that was just completed by a company called Prism. They're out of the UK, and they're a small and independent nonprofit news outlet led by journalists of color. And they report from the ground up the intersections of injustice. That's their focus in journalism. Well, this past summer, they resurrected a summer pilot program where staff members worked Monday through Thursday and they had Fridays off. And so they did this pilot for 12 weeks. At the end of it, staff members reported transformative results in their mental health, their work-life balance, their productivity, and the entire team unanimously recommended to continue that schedule long-term. What was really interesting too about this study is that what they found is that the 32-hour, 4-day work week actually resulted in increased productivity. It increased work-life balance for staff members, their mental health, and it has increased their rates of retention because, you know, now that's their edge, right? Just like Eva was talking about, you know, we've lost that edge in a lot of ways with a hybrid workforce, but, you know, this comes back, I think, to those creative and non-binary solutions. Like, well, what else can we do? And I think we're going to be in those positions quite a bit where we, you know, are creating or trying to be more and more creative with what we can offer our team. So I don't know if anyone has any reactions to that. It looks like Rick said, we utilize a 4-day work week and productivity has improved. We also acknowledge every state and federal holiday. Staff are also given the last 2 weeks of the year off, fully paid to spend with family. This has helped with burnout. That is such a great example, Rick. And we did something similar here over the summer, the 4th of July week. We offered that to staff as a full paid week of work so that they could have that week with their family and enjoy some of the summer activities that we're often too busy to enjoy. So that was a great help too. Rick, thanks so much for sharing that. So there's an idea for some of you that are, you know, looking for that edge to be more appealing to job seekers. Are there any other examples from leaders on the call that have helped in, you know, even morale, staff retention?
Rick posted in the chat. He said, we have a 4-day work week and productivity has greatly improved. We also acknowledge every state and federal holiday. Staff are also given the last 2 weeks of the year off to fully paid to spend with family, and that's helped burnout.
Thanks, Kaylin. What about that idea? Does a 4-day work week seem feasible? Does it kind of scare you? I would love to hear, again, from leaders on the call. What's your gut reaction when you hear others talking about implementing a 4-day work week? Kaylin said in the chat, that's a great idea. Now, one thing I will add to the 4-day work week that was published as part of that PRISM pilot is, you know, going back to the Great Resignation topic, one of the high percentages of why people were leaving at 48% was because of childcare. So a lot of the workers at PRISM, they are representative of the communities that they serve, much like CILs. And so a lot of them are working moms, you know, maybe single parents. And there was a lot of positive feedback out of that pilot with the level of stress it took off of those parents and individuals with children to not have to find, you know, daycare or childcare on that Friday. So they reported saving money on childcare, finding additional time to attend medical appointments. Some of them mentioned starting therapy. They felt like they had time to focus in on some of those self-care goals. And it allowed them to return to hobbies and just spend that time with family. And that extra day really seemed to have incredible results as far as the productivity and the mental well-being of the staff. So I think that is a really awesome consideration.
And Sydney Breslow seems to agree in the chat, says, I think it's a great idea and could be very appealing to job seekers. And you also have a comment from Kay McMillan. Finding sustainable funding is a big issue for Youth Lead NC right now as a small nonprofit that is still relatively new. We are kind of a cross between a silk and a SIL because we work with youth across the state. A lot of the board does the programming because we are in the process of hiring our first program coordinator.
Yes, yes. Going back to that funding, Kay, you know, because when Scott was talking about that, finding, you know, additional funds and getting more involved in philanthropy, in my mind, I was like, oh, well, that's a silver lining, right? Like that's something positive that COVID kind of forced, was looking at our funding streams and trying to diverse them a little more so that we can meet the needs of the current workforce. But the sustainability piece of that, you know, balances that positivity right back to level playing ground. Sustainable funding. Yes. I think collectively, one of the things we're trying to do in our state, and I don't know, Kay, how many SILs there are in North Carolina, but because we have 14 SILs in Michigan, we're trying to be more intentional with some of the larger grant and funding from the state that we apply for. So instead of individual centers applying for, you know, these smaller grants and going after these smaller pots of money, we're trying to pool our resources and apply for these grants as a single unit. And so it brings our, you know, our credibility up, because then we're covering more regions. So instead of just applying for funding maybe in my county, it's now extended into, you know, a whole nother region. That's one thing we've tried, partnering and collaborating with more organizations to go after funding, in hopes that, you know, that increases our chances. We've talked about the Great Resignation. We've talked about some of these ideas to be more appealing to job seekers. It sounds like, you know, there's a lot of shared concern with being able to hire the right people for our SILs right now, and have our teams complete to be able to do the work that's so important to our communities. Kind of moving away from that, and again, please share or contribute in any way that would be helpful for you. I would like to just open it up. What, besides hiring and retention right now, what are some of the additional challenges you're really facing as a leader? And on the opposite side of that spectrum, what about anything that, the last couple of years has really helped enhance for you, or has opened doors that maybe didn't exist before? I did just get the 10-minute alert. Thank you so much, Rachel. And then Rick said, I would like to add that with the 4-day work week, it did not affect hourly rate of pay, as the rates were adjusted to ensure staff was still earning the same. That is really important. Thank you, Rick, for making that distinction, because that can be a concern if you were to start talking about a 4-day work week, for 40-hour staff or, part-time staff. How would that impact them? But it sounds like what Rick did was, just distributed it differently so that the earning was the same, but that they're working a day less. Thank you so much for making that distinction. And then Daniel asked, if CILs were to move to a 4-day work week, do they consider it permanent, or is it considered more temporary? When the labor market changes, if and when it does, I would think staff would consider it permanent. So what are our thoughts on that? Would you see the 4-day work week being temporary or permanent? Rick, what about you? Is this going to be a permanent situation for you?
Hi, yes, I could answer that through a voice. So we actually started our 4-day work week about a year ago. And throughout the process, when we first started, some staff were off, like, let's say Monday, other staff were off Friday, but we ended up that being a little bit difficult because when we needed certain people, they'll be out of the office. So halfway through that, the pilot program that we were running, we decided to just make our office hours Monday through Thursday. And as of September, in discussing with our board, we decided that it's going to be permanent from now on moving forward.
Thanks, Rick, for sharing that. And I'm curious, was it difficult getting your board on board with that idea, or were they supportive? What was that process like for you?
So I don't have direct contact with the board, but in discussing with the people above me, no, they were on board. I think our board does listen a lot to our director of programs, our program managers, our input from our staff, and most of the staff that we have, actually a majority of the staff have been with the CIL for many years. So this is just something that it was done for them to help with the burnout and help with the retention rates as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Dan, it sounds like this is going to be a permanent thing for Rick still, at least. It is interesting to think about these issues that we're having, and kind of the anticipation of how long this can last. Eva, I saw you unmuted yourself. Would you like to add?
Thank you, Diane, for being so observant. What I was going to say was, we've had conversations about this, and we've talked about maybe a 4.5 day or 4-day. I think it's inevitable, and it would only put us in line with some of our European nations, who've had average work weeks for a long time now of 35 hours. So, and again, I think that study after study shows that nobody's productive for 8 hours a day. I don't care what they tell you, you're not either. And every hour over 8, the productivity rate decreases, So, I think it's inevitable, and I certainly have encouraged and will continue to recommend that we seriously consider this. And I I think it's like everything else. Right now, we think that and for a lot of us, Monday and Friday is not even the norm. So it's funny what we think is the norm when it's really not the norm for a lot of people. But generally speaking, business hours, let's say, are Monday through Friday, but it's only because somewhere along the way, somebody said this is, so they're just new normals, and our whole world now is about new normals, whatever that means. We don't even like the word normal in our business, right? Standard, whatever you want to call it. I call them normos. I call myself something else, so, but I think it's inevitable. I really think it's inevitable. And I think it's evident because, again, I live in a place that's kind of different anyway, but so many people already outside of my world they're doing gig work. They're doing, I mean, it's just a more fluid kind of flexible paradigm. And we're either going to keep up or we're going to drown, and we can't drown. We have too many people that are depending on us. So I'll leave that out, but thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was so well stated. Yeah, as we've lived through these unprecedented times of crisis and stress, we've witnessed our collective ability to not only adapt to new ways of living and working, but to re-examine outdated and often oppressive notions of productivity and this like worship of work, right? And our values of human beings beyond what we contribute to our work life. So I think this is going to be a really big conversation for future discussion and consideration. All right, I know I have a couple of contributions here in the chat. Get to those. Sydney says that writing policies that staff follow has been difficult. Some policies are sort of unspoken, which has of course been difficult to enforce with new employees. Yes, we are in the process of writing and approving new policies. I hope that is helpful. And Sydney, I'm sure if you're not already aware, but ILRU is an incredible resource for just kind of a policy check. I know I've sent some their way in the past, and then of course other CILs too. So if you're looking for specific policies, yeah, make sure that you're checking with your peers for sure. There are 8 CILs in North Carolina, Kay. Chuck gave you that affirmation. Thank you. And Dan says, great point, Eva. Folks, we have about 2 minutes left. Any pressing topics anyone showed up with today that we didn't cover or that you would really love to get out there? Seeing or hearing any? There was a quote that I wrote down for all the leaders and aspiring leaders on our IL leadership call today. And it is, the most meaningful way to succeed is to help other people succeed. And there's no doubt that's what we're all trying to do. And so I really appreciate all of the sharing and conversations. I hope the links that were shared bring some ideas to take back to your CILs or some thoughts to consider. Nonetheless, don't forget this. It's okay not to be okay right now. There's a lot of uncertainty in this world, and being a leader right now in this contemporary space is incredibly difficult, and you guys are all doing incredible jobs. And so take the time to affirm yourselves and the work that you're doing and the contributions you're making to your community. You are also important. So thank you so much for joining us. And Scott, I'll give it back to you for wrap up.
Okay, thanks, Diane. Thank you all for joining this session, and we enjoyed this conversation, or I did. And please don't forget to take time at the end of the session to complete the short evaluation to let us know how we can continue to improve. And if you're registered for the youth conference, please join back at 4 p.m. Pacific or 7 p.m. Eastern. And we hope you are all able to join us tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific and 12 Eastern. And have a great evening, everyone. Thanks.